Hey Trey, how are you?
I'm
Great.
doing
Nice to meet
great.
you.
Yes, nice
Trey,
to meet you.
your vibe is cool. Your name is Trey and you work for Shadow and Act. Like that's a
Thank
cool intro.
Even your voice as you started, I was like, oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
inspirational,
yeah,
Thank
very.
there's
you.
like a moonlight poster behind you. Like
Uh-huh.
this,
Yeah.
I try to have like the virtual, background vibes to give a joke to the interview. So I'm glad you like it. I'm glad you like it.
we're really working.
Um,
It's really working.
but it's not as cool as this show that I'm so excited to chat with you both about. Like, I was literally dying through some of these scenes. I was laughing. It was giving me the feelings. Like, it was just doing everything for me. And I wanted to ask, hopefully both of you can speak to this. When I was watching it, I felt like it was it seemed like it operated a little bit like maybe like an older cousin to Never Have I Ever, like an older, more experienced cousin that's kind of, been through a few more things. And I wanted to know, did you ever think about when conceiving the show, could it pair with Never Have I Ever? And if there are some inevitable comparisons to the shows, what makes this one more distinct than Never Have I Ever?
That is such a good question because I met Justin on Never Have I Ever, and he was so. I remember thinking when I was working with him because he had worked on Brooklyn Nine-Nine for years and I'd heard so much about him, but I was like, this guy is so good at nailing these young women's voices, and he seemed to love it. And then when we were starting on the new show, I was like, maybe he'd be interested. And I don't know, Justin, what do you think? Because you love that show too. It is definitely like raunchier, more adult
Yeah.
um, production. It looks very different than Never Have I Ever, but could it pair like a fine wine?
I think it's interesting. I think tonally, like, there are similarities between the two, but I would say the biggest difference to me is like, Never Have I Ever has such a strong drive that I have always loved from like Davy's personal experience dealing with grief and things like that. And everything else, the fun ensemble parts of it all kind of feed into that. And you get the comedy with the drama. Whereas our show, what something Mindy and I really want to explore was like how weird it is when you go away to college and you're randomly assigned to live with three strangers. Like, when else in your life are you told, like, you will now live in a tiny room with three people you've never met before? These are their names. That's all you know about them. So it felt like more of a go to ensemble situation.
I think that this show kind of gives the awkwardness of Never Have I Ever, but like in a different setting. Like some of those, I think that's where kind of the tone just kind of like meets. But like I love both. I love both shows.
Thank
So.
you. One thing that they have in common, I think, is young women with big personalities. Like
Mm-hmm.
we wanted in this show for the four leads to be incredibly different, but to come in with like big ambitions and want a lot of things. And I think that's true. I mean, I think that's just the kind of character that Justin and I like to write for.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I also think there's some production elements that we borrow from. Like the music on Never Have I Ever is so insanely good. So Mindy and I immediately were like, we need Brienne Rose, who does the music for Never Have I Ever, to do this show too. So I think there's some little things that also production wise, we're just like, if we love what they're doing there, we can work with it here too.
Yeah, yeah. And lastly, for both of you, what was the learning curve like, kind of crafting the show in your own experiences at this age, but also kind of learning like what does Gen Z do in college?
Yeah. So, okay. So that's a really great question, Trey. And I think that, Justin and I, huge nerds, and we are really A students. And I think there was no way we were going to do the show without doing like some hands-on research. So we basically like left our families in LA 2 weeks before the pandemic hit. So it was March 3rd of 2020 and went to the East Coast to do like a straight up research tour of Yale and Dartmouth, where we went to school. And we had to interview because the truth is, I didn't have sex in college and we wanted to do this really sex positive show about young people. And I didn't want it to be one of those shows where young people watched it and were like, what boomer wrote this show? Like, everything is out of date. So that was really important to take that trip.
Yeah. And then also to emulate that in our writers' room where we're hiring young women who are closer to this experience who can keep us in check when I'm like, maybe they would do this. And they're like, oh, no. And I just have to say, okay, yeah, you're right. You're young and cool. And I think you're absolutely right.
And also to be people who were a little bit more, sexually advanced than us in college. So we could interview them pervertedly about their experiences and they could use it in the show.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I was exceptionally cool. I was in multiple a cappella groups, multiple comedy groups, and I think those are what people define cool with. But yes, sexual promiscuity didn't quite check that box.
Well, thank you both so much. I enjoyed this conversation. I can't wait for everyone to see the series. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Trey.
Thank
All
you.
right,
Appreciate
have a
it.
good one.